The greatest Formula One era. Every Formula One decade is special in its own right. The 70s had the rebels, the 80s had the horsepower, the 2000s, Schumacher perfection, and today's era, it's global, viral, and always online. But the 1990s, it might just be the greatest decade of all time, because during the 90s, we witnessed the greatest rivalries of all time. The saddest heartbreak the sport has ever known, and the greatest rise of a soon-to-be legend. Rivalries that felt personal, races that broke our hearts, legends who risk it all and sometimes pay the price. It was the decade when Formula One grew up, where safety stopped being an afterthought, where technology met talent, and where a new generation took the torch. From Senna's fire to Schumacher's rise to Häkkinen's ice-cold dominance. We saw the old world fade and the modern F1 era take shape. The 90s wasn't just another decade, it was the moment Formula One became something more. This is the full recap of the 1990s from 1990 to 1999. 1990 season. Before we talk about the 1990 season, we need to go back just 1 year. The 1989 season didn't end with celebration. Instead, it ended with one of the most controversial moments in Formula One history. At the Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka, Senna was fighting Prost for the championship. Senna needed to win to keep alive his hopes of retaining his World Championship crown. However, Suzuka was one of the few races in which Prost was able to outpace his normally quicker teammate, narrowly leading for the majority of the race. Then on the 47th lap, Senna made an ambitious passing maneuver into the chicane. Prost turned into the corner early to block Senna's advance, and the cars collided. Prost stepped out of his car, but Senna returned to the track, pitted, retook the lead, and won. However, he was subsequently disqualified for not rejoining the circuit at the point at which he had left it, and Prost was declared world champion. The FIA said he cut the chicane, but Senna believed something else was going on. He believed the president of the FIA, Jean-Marie Balestre, was protecting Prost. He said the championship was manipulated, and from that day on, he never let it go. So, going into the 1990 season, there was tension like never before. Senna stayed at McLaren, Prost left for Ferrari, and the rivalry turned into all-out war. In fact, you would have been right to say they hated each other. Race after race, tension built, and by the time they got to Suzuka, the same track where it all went down the year before, Senna had already made up his mind. This time, he wouldn't let the FIA decide the title. So, when the lights went out, Senna drove straight into Prost at turn 1, took them both out, won the championship on the spot. It was bold, it was dirty, and depending on who you ask, it was either revenge or racing justice. But one thing was for sure, he wasn't going to let it get so close anymore. 1991 season. By 1991, Ayrton Senna was, well, still the fastest, but this time he was in full command. After the chaos of 1990, this season was different. There was no revenge to chase. No politics to fight, just business as usual. So this time, Senna put on an all-time performance. He won the first 4 out of 5 races. Phoenix, Brazil, Imola, Monaco, the classics. Every time he stepped into the McLaren Honda MP4/6, he looked untouchable, especially in the rain. In fact, that win in Brazil may be the most emotional of his entire career, because he had tried 7 times to win a Grand Prix in his home country, and all had been unsuccessful. But this time, he was determined. So despite his gearbox failing, a situation in which he was stuck in 6th gear for the last laps, his neck was gone, his arms barely working, but he held on. He crossed the line and finally won his home Grand Prix. But here's the thing, while Senna was busy making history, the 91st season also saw someone step in. Somewhere in the middle of the season, the next chapter quietly stepped in the form of future great Michael Schumacher. a 22-year-old German who at that time made his F1 debut at the Belgian Grand Prix, replacing Bertrand Gachot at Jordan. And even though it was just one race, but what a debut! It's just like that. A new era was born. The 1991 season also saw Nigel Mansell back with Williams, and this time he was hungry for his victory. The same year also saw Ferrari's 643 chassis struggling to keep up with McLaren. This led to Alain Prost being fired by Ferrari midway through the season after criticizing the car. This year also saw Senna go on to win his third and final World Championship. And while that year was by far the least dramatic, the same can be said for the 1992 season. 1992. If 1991 was Senna at full command, then 1992 was Williams at full domination. Because while McLaren was still competitive, Williams had built a car that looked like it was from the future. The FW14B, with active suspension, traction control, paddle shifter, and data systems that made the rest of the grid look prehistoric. It wasn't just fast, it was intelligent, and the man behind the wheel was Nigel Mansell. Nigel had come back in the 91st season with unfinished business. He had come close in 86, been lucky in 87, retired in 90, but now he had the best car and he wasn't wasting the chance. He won the first 5 races, dominated everywhere, and the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, he made another masterclass. He took pole, led every lap, won the race, and was mobbed by fans on the cool-down lap. He was a hero in Britain, and now, finally, a world champion. In the same season, Senna managed to win 3 cities. Prost was nowhere to be found. And as for Michael Schumacher, he was settling into his new home at Benetton. Quiet, confident, calculating. As beautiful as those events were, none was as significant as the debut of the 5th female driver in Formula One history. The 1992 season saw the debut of Giovanni Amati. Unfortunately, it would be the last time to this day. In fact, the 92 season would be the first and last time we saw her on the paddock, as she would be replaced by Damon Hill. I wonder what happened to him. We'll get to that soon. The 1992 season marked the beginning of a new era. But in 1993, that's when it all turned upside down. 1993. The 1993 season began on March 14th in South Africa and ended on November 7th in Australia after 16 events. It was probably one of the craziest yet dominant seasons ever. Firstly, Alain Prost returned from a year away from the sport to replace reigning champ Nigel Mansell in the all-conquering Williams-Renault team. The Williams design this year was by far the best. It was so good that they won the Constructors' Championship by 84 points ahead of McLaren Ford, winning with a score of exactly twice that of the runner-ups. This same car helped Alain Prost claim the Drivers' World Championship, with 26 points ahead of Ayrton Senna of McLaren. Damon Hill of Williams-Renault was third, but even with his win, Prost received little credit from the press. Every time he added to his record number of GP victories, it was attributed to the Williams car. But the blame fell squarely on the Frenchman's shoulders when he lost. Nevertheless, by the end of the season, Prost had won 7 races, enough to clinch the title. But the highlight of this season was probably this moment between the rivals to celebrate Prost's retirement. It was a heartwarming moment, which perhaps is even more heartbreaking because Senna didn't know what was coming to him in the 1994 season. 1994. The 1993 season ended on a rather emotional note. However, the 1994 season started with ding 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 hype. Senna was now with Williams. He was the best driver in the world, in the fastest car in the world. What could go wrong, right? Well, as it turned out, everything! The season was one of the most tragic and most controversial in Formula One's history. Ayrton Senna had left McLaren after 6 years to join Williams, who had dominated the last 2 seasons with their formidable Renault engine package. He was eager to drive in the FW16, but the FW16 turned out to be a nightmare. It was unstable, tricky, and angry on the throttle. Senna hated it, even saying it didn't belong on a track, but he still put it on pole 3 times in a row. Because, well, he was Senna. And then came Imola, which totally defined the season. Rubens Barrichello was badly injured in a violent crash at Variante Bassa in practice. Then in Saturday qualifying, Roland Ratzenberger speared into the barriers at the Villeneuve kink, dying instantly. This was one of the saddest moments of the race, or so we thought at the time. The very next day, a shaken Senna visited the crash scene and was urged not to race by Professor Sid Watkins. On race day, then the unthinkable happened. When the race restarted from behind the safety car, Senna crashed to his death at the Tamburello on lap 7. And just like that, the heartbeat of Formula One stopped. Senna's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a shift in reality. The moment the sports realized it wasn't invincible, but the show had to go on. While the world was mourning, Michael Schumacher was doing something else entirely, winning everything. He took 6 of the first 7 races. He was fast, ruthless, and focused like a sniper. But it wasn't a clean run. There were disqualifications, suspensions, FIA politics, and then came the final race in Adelaide. Schumacher was leading the championship by just 1 point, with Hill close behind. On lap 36, Schumacher slid off the circuit and thumped a wall, surely ruining his right rear suspension. As Hill moved to sweep past him at the following corner, Schumacher chopped across, running his wheel across the front right of Hill's car, nearly flipping his B194 into the air. And just like that, Schumacher was world champion. Some say it was clever, others say dirty, but either way, F1 had a new king. 1994 became the turning point. The old guards were gone, and now it was time for the new. 1995. By 1995, things were clearer. The old guard had left the grid, and Michael Schumacher owned it. This time, no scandals, no disqualifications, just raw pace and total control. He won 9 out of 17 races, took pole after pole, and basically said, "This is my sport now." Benetton, once the underdog, became the benchmark, and the only person who was chasing him was Damon Hill. Hill had the car, the team, but he didn't have Schumacher's edge. Their battles were personal, tense, wheel-to-wheel moments, and the feeling that Hill was always almost there but never quite. Meanwhile, Ferrari was still rebuilding, and McLaren still searching for their next driver. Everyone else watching the Michael era begin in real time. 1996. After getting slapped around by Benetton and Schumacher in 95, Williams showed up in 1996 better than ever, and the result was the FW18. This car looked like it was built in a wind tunnel by the gods themselves. Damon Hill had the best chance of his life. After years of almosts and what-ifs, 1996 was his year. He now had a title-worthy car and 16 races to get it done, which he did in the most dominant fashion. After winning 8 races to become world champion, he became the first son of a world champ to ever do it. I'm sure Graham Hill would have been proud. But here's where it gets funny. Right after winning the title, Williams dropped him. Yes, they fired the reigning world champion. Why? Because waiting in the wings was a young, sharp-jawed, bleached blonde Canadian, Jacques Villeneuve. And in his rookie season, he almost took the title from Hill. He won 4 races, stood his ground, and made it clear he wasn't here to be anyone's sidekick. And boy was he right, because the very next year, he proved why he was the gamble Williams took. 1997. Now it's 1997. Villeneuve is the Williams guy, and Schumacher was back. Only this time he was now in Ferrari red, and he was ready to reclaim his spot. And for the whole season, it was Villeneuve versus Schumacher, Williams versus Ferrari, polished confidence versus cold-blooded calculation. Villeneuve had the better car. Schumacher had, well, Schumacher things. And so it all came down to Jerez, the final race of the season. They were tied on points. Villeneuve dove up the inside. Schumacher turned in. They collided, but this time the trick didn't work. Schumacher was out, while Villeneuve continued, finishing third to claim the title. And worst of all, Schumacher was disqualified from the entire championship. That's how wild it was. 1997 gave Williams their last championship to date. It was also the last year an independent team ruled Formula One. From the point forward, things would never be the same. 1998 and 1999. 1998 and 1999 were the peak chess matches between Ferrari and McLaren. This was the start of the Hakkinen versus Schumacher rivalry and the final evolution before Ferrari took over the 2000s. By 1998, it was game on. Ferrari had rebuilt, and this time they were better. Michael Schumacher was sharper than ever, but McLaren outdid everyone as they brought a missile. The MP4/13, designed by Adrian Newey, was sleek, silver, and stupidly fast. And behind the wheel was Mika Hakkinen. He needs no words, honestly, but when the lights went out, he was ruthless. McLaren destroyed the opener in Melbourne. Hakkinen and Coulthard even swapped positions as part of a gentleman's agreement, but that didn't last long because after that, it was full war. The season quickly turned into a two-man shootout. Hakkinen versus Schumacher. Hakkinen was leading all season, but Schumacher fought back mid-season, winning in Argentina, Canada, France, and Britain, including that weird moment he crossed the finish line in the pit lane. But Hakkinen struck where it mattered. I mean, if you remember Belgium, the crash on lap 1, that's where Schumacher nearly tried to fight Coulthard in the pits after crashing into him in the spray. It was chaos, but Hakkinen stayed cool, and by the time they reached Suzuka, the title was on the line. Schumacher stalled at the start, charged back up the grid until a puncture ended it all. And Mika Hakkinen, world champion. McLaren was back on top. But not for long. Now, 1999 was supposed to be the rematch, Mika versus Michael. Round 2! Ding 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 ding! And for the first half of the season, it looked that way. Until Silverstone. At the British Grand Prix, Schumacher suffered a brake failure going into Stowe. He went straight into the wall, eventually breaking his leg, and was ruled out for 6 races. And just like that, Ferrari's golden hope was gone, or so we thought. In a dramatic turn of events, Eddie Irvine, the backup driver, stepped up and Ferrari threw everything behind him. And the result was that he won 4 races and led the title fight into the final race. But Hakkinen wasn't about to let Ferrari take it that easily. So in the most clutch moment of all, once again in Suzuka, Hakkinen delivered the title. You know what? Irvine really gave it his all, but without Schumacher, Ferrari couldn't close the deal. The 90s had given us so many iconic moments, but it was also a decade of drama, innovation, tragedy, and glory. But most importantly, it was the decade that set the tone of the years to come, because the innovations that were done in those years set the tone for Ferrari and Schumacher's domination of the 2000s. So, was it the greatest Formula One decade of all time? Maybe. Maybe not. But it was the decade that had everything. Let us know your favorite moment. Drop a comment, share the video with someone who loves F1, and don't forget to subscribe, because next time, we're diving into another story you don't want to miss.